We are delighted that this is I think our first collaboration with the Rabin Chair Forum at George Washington University, and we couldn't have a better topic and better speakers. Our title is The Consequences of the Emerging American-Iranian Nuclear Deal, a topic that has evolved over the past weeks and will continue to. And this should give us an opportunity to hear some of the views of people who have been working on this for some time, and insights that I hope will be a benefit to those of you here and those of you who are following us on the stream from cameras at the back. Our co-host in this is Professor Walter Reich, who I'll introduce, and he'll introduce our speakers. He is Yitzhak Rabin Memorial Professor in International Affairs, Ethics, and Human Behavior, and Professor of Psychiatry and Behavioral Science at George Washington University. I had to read that because it's pretty complex, and he's also a friend. So it's particularly delightful for me to have him here and to be our partner in this event. He's a senior scholar at the Woodrow Wilson Center for Scholars and former director of the United States Holocaust Museum. Dr. Reich is also a lecturer in psychiatry at Yale University, professor of psychiatry at the Uniformed Services University of Health Sciences, and a contributing editor of the Wilson Quarterly. He has written and lectured widely on the Holocaust and genocide, terrorism, human rights, national memory, and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He's written on psychiatry, medical ethics, national and international affairs. I can tell you from my personal experience collaborating with the education of young undergraduates, he's also an outstanding teacher and, as I said, a good friend. It's my pleasure to introduce Professor Walter Reich.
Well, thank you, John. For those of you who are at the Hudson Institute, and for those of you who are visitors, I want you to know that the person who is the COO here is one of the most decent people in Washington. So, I know it's not a huge audience, a huge population, but it's certainly he's a member of that population. I don't have to talk about the importance of this topic. The speakers will. And it's at a critical point because the so-called framework agreement has been announced. The two sides have identified them, characterized them quite differently. We're all waiting to see what the outcome will be. Everybody knows that certain parties want the outcome to occur. And Professor Inbar is going to talk about that. And Lee Smith will participate in the program as well. He's going to basically going to be a commentator for the talk that Professor Inbar will give. I want to thank, by the way, Ken Weinstein, who is the head of the Hudson Institute, and who, with whom I hope we continue to join forces and have ongoing joint programs. Professor Inbar is a professor of political studies at Bar-Ilan University in Israel and director of its renowned Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies, also known by its acronym as the BESA Center. He was educated at the Hebrew University with a BA in Political Science and English Literature, and at the University of Chicago, where he got an MA and a PhD in Political Science. He served as visiting professor at Hopkins, Georgetown, visiting scholar or fellow at the Woodrow Wilson Center, and he's been at a bunch of universities of lesser renown: Harvard, MIT, Columbia, Oxford, Yale, Why'd you leave out those others? His area of specialization is Middle East strategy, Middle Eastern strategic issues, with a special interest in the politics and strategy of Israeli national security. He's written lots of books, edited lots of volumes, written lots of articles. Probably many of you have seen some of them. His latest book that I know of is Israel's National Security Issues and Challenges Since the Yom Kippur War. He also wrote the Israeli-Turkish Entente, and he wrote a book about Rabin's Israel national security policy. This is the Bessa Institute's latest publication. It's one of those rare things, something in hard copy, but here it is. It also has a website, and I'm sure you will find many more things on it. Lee Smith is a senior fellow here at the Hudson Institute, in addition to the fact that he happens to be an alumnus of George Washington University, where he got a BA, which I was delighted to learn. He has worked at a number of journals, magazines, and publishers, including the Hudson Review, Echo Press, Athenaeum, Grant Street, GQ, Talk Magazine. He's a senior editor of the Weekly Standard, editor-in-chief of the, he was the editor-in-chief of the Voice Literary Supplement, the Village Voice's national monthly literary magazine. His book on Arab societies, The Strong Horse, Power, Politics, and the Clash of Arab Civilizations, was published in 2010. And here is the part that brings me the greatest envy. He knows Spanish, Arabic, French, and Latin. So it's a pleasure to ask Professor Inbar to come here and speak. The plan for the noon discussion, we have 45 minutes left to it, is for Professor Inbar to speak for 10 or 15 minutes, right? Maybe 20 minutes. Lee Smith is going to ask him a few questions or engage him in a conversation. I have a bunch of questions I would love to ask him if there's an opportunity, but the most important thing is that the audience should have a chance to interact with Professor Inbar. Thank you.
I hope I have a long enough leash. Good day. It's my pleasure to be at Hudson again. And I'm happy that Rabin Chair is co-chairing this event. Indeed, you need to be a psychiatrist in order to deal with the Middle East. And so I'll speak about the consequences of the deal. Of course, I don't know if it's going to be a deal, but probably there is going to be a deal. And the consequences I'll enumerate are already here, even without the deal, the formal deal. And the first consequence of what has happened so far in the negotiations between the P5+1 and Iran is that the US diplomacy confirms once more the perception of US weakness and confusion in the Middle East. We've seen Libya being destroyed by leadership from behind, Syria oscillating, red line, no red line, seen support for the Muslim Brothers and criticism of Assisi. And now the crowning of the American efforts is a deal with Iran. And to make it quite clear, the expectations of the region is rollback. This is what people in countries that are allied with the United States wanted. This is what the international community wanted. This is rooted in a National Security Council resolution. No enrichment. And from what I know, it is 6,000 centrifuges, according to the US State Department Secretary Kerry. In a moment of weakness, he admitted that the Iranians are going to be 3 months from enriching enough fissionable material for a bomb. And the second thing which I want to make quite clear, it really doesn't matter what Washington thinks. What it matters is how the people in the region see the developments. And maybe in Washington, there are people that are very satisfied with what has been happening, saying this is the most pragmatic consequence. But the region, and I'm speaking about Riyadh, about Cairo, about Amman, Rabat, as well as other places in the world, see the deal in 2 ways. The first result, the first consequence, is basically legitimization of Iran with an advanced nuclear status. This is quite clear. It doesn't matter the details of the deal. This is the deal. The Americans agreed to have Iran almost within, a nuclear power. And the second consequence of the deal, what transpires very clearly, is that the United States decided to allow Iran to take a more important role in regional affairs. The US calls it a responsible role. I'm not sure if in Farsi, in Persian, responsible means what in English it means, but that's a different thing. It changes the regional balance of power. Actually, it catapults Iran, historic regional power, back into the high politics of the region after it was isolated for many years. And this is a clear consequence that everybody adjusts already to. A third consequence, and we've seen it already, it's intensification of proliferation efforts. And the American effort to try to convince the Gulf countries or any other regional country that they can rely on American deterrence, what's called extended deterrence in the professional jargon, is not going to work. They don't rely on America. Americans are nice. I like Americans. But not everybody believes that this administration in particular is reliable. And therefore, they are not going to accept an American nuclear umbrella. By the way, the French also didn't accept a French nuclear umbrella, and they developed their own bombinette in the 60s. There is no reason to think that in Riyadh, in Cairo, in Ankara, here there is some reservation, will rely on American nuclear umbrella. Therefore, they'll continue and intensify their efforts to be on par with Iran. And the Saudis said already, we want the same. The Egyptians will say also, we want the same. And eventually the Turks will do everything to be on the same level. And indeed, those are the 3 main regional powers that will try to get a bomb because they cannot live with an Iran, with a Persia that has a bomb. A fourth consequence. Israel fears a nuclear Middle East, multipolar nuclear Middle East. We do not believe that stable deterrence can be achieved for a variety of reasons. It's a different lecture. The distances, the political mechanisms in the region, a two-azimuth posture, nuclear posture. Therefore, what the Americans are doing with Iran are pushing Israel into thinking even more seriously about preemption. And if we do not want a nuclear, multipolar Middle East, Israel has to prevent it. By the way, it's not an easy decision. Particularly when in the White House sits the guy that signed on this agreement. And Israel, after all, needs the United States for a variety of reasons, and it's not going to be an easy decision. I'm not sure it will be taken, although I personally think this is what should be done. Now, without Israeli preemption, we'll see nuclear proliferation in the Middle East, which means several more things. First of all, a more aggressive Iran, a powerful Iran. We should not forget that Iran has a rich history which is partly imperial. And the current administration, the smiling guys, are speaking about an important regional and global role for Iran. And we shouldn't forget what they are doing, supporting terrorism. And as a result of a more powerful Iran, particularly after the sanctions will completely be eroded or removed, it doesn't matter really. They'll have more money in order to produce mischief in the Middle East. And they are very good at that. We definitely can see a process of Finlandization of the Gulf states. Some of them are already bandwagoning, moving toward Iran. Particularly those countries that have significant Shiite population, like Kuwait, a third, Bahrain, almost everything. I think that the Iranians have a powerful incentive to try to destabilize Saudi Arabia. It's not that difficult. The eastern province, where most of the oil is mostly Shiite. As they can use the Shiite feelings in order to cause trouble. By the way, if they try and are successful in destabilizing Egypt, they are also successful in if they are successful in destabilizing Saudi Arabia, they are also successful in destabilizing Egypt. Egypt needs money from the Gulf. The foreign policy of Egypt for years has been to make sure they have enough money to provide food to their people. And the Sisi is doing not bad in the area of economics, but still, we are talking about 90 million people with tremendous economic problems. And there are billions of dollars that are being transferred to Egypt every year in order to keep Egypt afloat. If the Gulf states go, if Saudi Arabia goes, Egypt goes as well, or are busy with much more domestic issues. Egypt and Saudi Arabia are two nuclear proliferators, potential proliferators and competitors in the region. And finally, no, not finally. I still have a few minutes. They will get what is their stated goal, the eviction of the United States from the Gulf. This is their goal. They're saying it. They're not bashful about it. We have to take them seriously. If they are successful in Finlandizing the Gulf states, if they are successful in weakening tremendously Saudi Arabia, you are next. Some of the people in America like the idea. I'm not sure. It's a good idea for the United States to leave the Gulf. But it will have serious geopolitical repercussions over the control of energy in the world. That's an important issue. And Iran will benefit from it, obviously. I can definitely see, if there will be nuclear proliferation, a revival of the Turkish-Persian rivalry, which was for many years on a very low heat, partly because Turkey is within NATO, partly because Turkey is following now Islamic policies, which are convenient to Iran, partly because Turkey is dependent upon Iranian gas, energy. Those two are historic regional powers in the Middle East, and nowadays they display revisionist tendencies, unquestionably. They have big appetite. Erdogan and the mullahs have a lot of appetite. They are not status quo powers. And the final point which I want to make concerns my own country. Israel will be increasingly isolated in the region. We've never been quite popular in the region, let's face it. But we are successful in producing ad hoc pragmatic alliances. This will be more difficult. Yet, at the same time, because what will be happening in the region, Israel will be more important to the United States and the West as being probably the only stable country that an American plane, if they want to land somewhere in the Middle East, will be able to land. Incirlik is not open freely to American airplanes. A NATO country, a NATO ally. Egypt is being pushed by the Americans into Russian hands. Saudis, who knows who will be the Saudis if the Iranians are able to get their goals. Therefore, Israel will be more important strategically. I'm not sure that this is a big consolation for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ephraim. Can you hear me? Adam, is this working okay?
No, it's not.
No? Now? Yes. Thanks. That was terrific. Thanks very much. And so I wanted to ask a few follow-up questions, and then we'll open it up to some other people in the audience. I guess one of the first things I wanted to ask is what you ended on, the issue that how this will complicate things for Israel. I mean, I guess insofar as the administration is looking to, or this is what it seems to be the case, minimize its profile in the Middle East, potentially this could have been a good thing for Israel, right? Insofar as the United States comes out a little bit and says, now we're going to empower our big ally, frequently referred to as an American aircraft carrier in the Middle East. But this is not what's happened. The administration instead has seemed to attack, or has not seemed, has attacked the Netanyahu government. Why do you think this is happening? Why do you think instead of the U.S. trying to empower a long-time Middle East ally and a very powerful and useful Middle East ally, as you say, our most reliable ally, why has the administration tried to weaken rather than strengthen this ally?
I quote Shlomo Avineri, you know, a famous professor at Hebrew University, that I was his student. He told me that President Obama has a career as a community worker, not foreign policy. And when you deal with a community issue, you try to identify the bullies and to try to co-opt them. And he suggested that this is the type of thinking that Obama has brought to the Middle East. And from the very beginning, this administration tried to engage Iran, engage Syria, both enemies. So maybe this sounds good, you know, for a liberal community worker. But in the Middle East, you do not engage your enemies. You try to weaken them, kill them if necessary, but do not engage. So, you know, it looks, and we all know that sometimes being a foe of the administration, you get a better treatment than being a friend. This is a complaint from, not only from Israel. I heard it in Poland, I heard it in Korea. I can understand maybe a strategic decision, looking at the Arab world and seeing that the state structure is being destroyed. And America needs a policeman in the region, and there are only, few candidates that can do the job. Of course, Israel is not one of them because of the differences, cultural differences between us and the region.
Do you think they're looking to Iran to do that?
I see. They say it. They say it. I hear it.
No, certainly, right. I mean, the thought process, we can certainly see them working it out. As you say, Israel is not capable of, or Israel is capable of doing that certain amount of work in the Eastern Mediterranean, but not throughout the Persian Gulf, as you're saying. What about one of the things that we hear frequently is that there's not, of course, an open alliance between Israel and the GCC states, Saudi Arabia and the Persian Gulf, the Arab sheikdoms. Do you think that that they are moving closer because of Iran? Do you see anything larger coming of this eventually, or do you think that this is just a consequence of the Iranian problem?
What's this?
Well, the relationship between Israel and the GCC states. Do you think this will develop into something larger? Because you were saying before that Israel will become more and more isolated. Is it possible that there will be an actual alliance with the Gulf states?
I don't think the Saudi Arabia and the Arab states will come out of the closet. They have too many domestic problems, and they don't want to burden themselves with better relations with the Jewish state, particularly if they are facing radicals. But business is business, and as long as we can do things together which are useful to both sides, this will happen. But I think it might happen less and less if they are intimidated by the Iranians.
What do you think is happening now? I mean, what's your sense? Again, we get some sort of idea of different things that are alleged to be happening, but what's your sense of what's going on?
I think it's a very fluid situation now. The region, the states that survived the Arab Spring are particularly in the Gulf and Saudi Arabia, are at crossroads, try to think what are their best choices. Obviously, they rejected the American nuclear umbrella. We'll see an arm race. The Iranians will try to buy more weapons in order to try to defend themselves from the Iranians. But the Iranians will not necessarily go via conventional armies. They can do it through subversion, which will be more difficult for them. And the quality of the Sunni bloc is not very good, let's face it. Several years already, Turkey, a Sunni power, Saudi Arabia, a Sunni power, try together to put an end to the regime of Assad. And they are not successful. I don't hear about great Saudi successes in Yemen. So there is a limit to what we can expect of these powers. And Iran is a very sophisticated actor.
I certainly think you're right. I mean, I think in what we've seen over the last half century and more is that the Sunni powers can project power because of the United States. If the United States is not there, and as we're seeing more clearly now, it's extremely difficult for them to project power.
The only Sunni power that is able to project, a distance is Egypt. But the tensions between America and Egypt are known,
Right.
are being taken advantage by the Russians. And it's also Egypt without Saudi money will be in big trouble.
If I can ask you something, I just want to stick on Israel again for a couple more minutes here. One of the things that we've been seeing in the news a lot lately, we've been seeing different reports, both in the American press and, of course, the Israeli press, talking about Hezbollah. I mean, there have effectively been warnings. There have effectively been warnings coming from official Israel that Hezbollah has lots of missiles and rockets in civilian areas throughout all of Lebanon, in fact, and Israeli officials are saying if this war goes hot, it's going to be a big problem for all of Lebanon. And I guess, when we talk about the Iranians, we're not just talking about Iran, we're not just talking about Tehran, we're talking about their different assets throughout the region. So I guess if you can give us some sense of what people are saying about Hezbollah right now in Israel, what's their concern? We know that Hezbollah is heavily committed in Syria, but of course, again, their raison d'etre is allegedly Israel. So, what are official Israelis thinking about this?
We don't like Hezbollah.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. Okay. I don't know why.
And we've heard the leader last week, giving a speech in hiding, still in hiding, and he speaks quite clearly about the Hezbollah priorities. The first priority is to keep Assad in power, because he is the linchpin to Iran for them. And Israel is relegated to the small Satan, if we use regional vernacular. And so if they start a war, they may start a war if we attack Iran. And they probably can exact a cost of a few hundred Israelis. We have, of course, the Iron Dome that can protect, not the population, it can protect the strategic installations, the airfields, the power stations, the ports. This is what we have the Iron Dome for. We don't have enough batteries. We try to get more, but yes, they'll do damage. And
is there any sense that something might happen, that Israel might act preemptively against Hezbollah, or that Hezbollah might act preemptively against Israel? What's your... Again, I'm just noting the amount of news coming out of this, and it's surprising. Because if we see that Hezbollah is so committed in Syria, why do we keep hearing news reports about this as well?
They try to establish an additional front on the Golan Heights with Iranian help. And we try to prevent it by force. I will not be surprised to see even Turkish proxies on the Golan Heights. Erdogan made a speech a week and a half ago about calling the Muslims to go Jerusalem, not as tourists, of course. And you see, we should not lose the focus. Our main problem is Iran. If in order to do Iran well, we have to clean southern Lebanon before that, let's do it. But we should not be distracted by Hezbollah from the main target, which is Iran. So I think the developments in Syria help us deal with this issue, just mowing the grass, as Israelis say.
How is that? How does Syria help with mowing the issue?
The Syrians
mowing the lawn,
the Hezbollah is busy in Syria. They take a lot of losses.
Right.
And they, even part of the military equipment probably has to go first to the Syrians rather than to go to Hezbollah. So to some extent, the Syrian war paralyzes, to some extent, the offensive capabilities of Hezbollah.
You, before, when you were speaking, you seemed to be of two minds as to whether or not Israel might be capable of attacking Iranian nuclear facilities or willing to do it. If you can elaborate a bit on that, give me your sense of...
I think we are able to do it. There's no question about our ability to do it. I know there are plans. This is not a secret. There are plans. We invested money in creating the capabilities to do it. The issue is not capabilities, the issue is political will. And Netanyahu, more than any other political figure in Israel, is very much adamant on this issue. This doesn't mean that he orders the IDF to go into Iran tomorrow morning. Netanyahu has a historic perspective that makes him ready to give such an order, from what I know of him. Not personally, from people around him. So we have the capability. The timing is also an issue.
Right. If I can ask about the political will, because one of the things that we understood was during the elections that it was not just Netanyahu who saw Iran as the major strategic threat, but that there's a very, very wide consensus about this in Israel, including the domestic opponents of the prime minister. Yeah. So what's the problem with the political will? Where is there? Do you just mean the individual?
There is a president in Washington that doesn't like the idea that Israel should hit Iran. That's a political problem. Right. And in Israel, by the way, for an American audience, there's great consensus on many issues. Portraying Israel as divided is simply not true. We are in favor of attacking Iran. We are in favor of a two-state solution that I don't think will happen anytime soon. And we are in great agreement about being a capitalist economy, which is doing extremely well. So Israel has great consensus, and still somebody has to give the order. And take into consideration the tensions between Israel and the United States at this time, and it's a complex relationship. Right. It's not only black or let's
Well, let me ask. I mean, if we're talking about the United States minimizing its role in the region, isn't there a way in which the Prime Minister of Israel can say, the Americans are leaving, the Americans are gone, we don't care what you say because you're not here. What are we supposed to do? You're going to give orders to us from thousands of miles away? Everyone in the region on our side agrees with this. Why can't, in a certain sense, they overrun, or isn't there a sense that what the Americans say now is irrelevant?
Well, it's easy to say it in Washington, but
I'm just starting a conversation.
But the issue is simple. We are a small country, a small ally of the United States, We fly American airplanes. We shoot American missiles. We need America for a lot of things in the international arena. Just last week on the nuclear proliferation conference, America delivered. So this is an issue that, you know, I'll take a long historic view. The Jewish people lost twice their state because they were not careful in making the right international considerations. It's not easy to confront a superpower, even if it's a superpower in decline, which I'm not sure it's true, but even if we assume that the US is in decline and wants to leave the Middle East, I advocate caution. At the same time, I am all in favor of attacking. But it's not my decision. I think that sometimes you have to confront a superpower, but I can definitely understand the caution and the reluctance to create, you know, basically is to poke the President of the United States in its eye. You know, he makes a great agreement. You know, this is his heritage, I know, and we say, forget about it, you know. We do our own stuff. Well, so it's not...
Well, let me ask you, is one of the consequences, one of the possible consequences of the U.S.-Iran deal, if the U.S. is withdrawing somewhat, does Israel look around and look at other powers around the world, say, well, there's China, there's India, there's Russia?
I don't think that there is, for Israel, I'm not sure for other countries, a real alternative to the United States.
Why?
Listen, Russia is a third world power with nuclear weapons. China is indeed a powerful country, but still not the United States, far from being the United States. India, we have excellent relations with the Indians. But the Indians buy from us weapons, not they don't sell weapons to us. So if I take a look at the international scene, the only game in town is the United States. And actually, I'm being a fellow American. I'm happy.
No, I know.
I think that America is the best superpower we can deal with. You know, what's happening, you know, the question many Israelis ask, you know, is, do we have an historic accident in Washington, or is it a trend? Many hope that this is an historic accident in the American political tradition. So we have 20 months. 20 months is a long time. Countries can do a lot of damage.
Right. Maybe 20 months, maybe more. Before I open it up for questions, let me just ask my one last question, which is, how does the United States change its position? Let's say it is just 20 months. It's a historical accident. And the next administration, whether it's Democrat or Republican, will recognize how important it is for the United States to, again, be the power broker and the great power in the Middle East. What has to happen? What does the United States have to do to reassert its bona fides in the Middle East?
Well, I think eventually the Iranians will be caught cheating. I'm sure they are cheating all the time, but they are not caught. This will maybe change something in the United States. I think if some of the developments I mentioned will become clearer in Washington, they may be, you know, rethinking of the American foreign policy towards the Middle East.
Will the government of Israel believe it? Will they say, oh, okay, again, the Americans are serious? Not serious, but again, the Americans have this perspective they've had for decades, and now we see that the Obama White House was something of an anomaly, and so now the Americans, how does the next administration prove?
I think business as usual. You know, for example, last summer, we were subjected to an embargo, arms embargo. The Americans didn't send us weapons that they were supposed to. So if this you know, if the relationship goes back to normal, I don't know what that means, but you know, to what it was, then you see, we don't need proof that you love us all the time. You know, some people, you know, like to be reinforced, you know, she loves me, he loves. No, we are practical. We are fine, you know. We look at what's arriving at the votes, you know. That's what counts, you know. Love, it's a different story. There is not love in international relations.
Thank you, Ephraim. Walter, would you like to? Should we wait for? Do we have a microphone? We have two racing. Thanks. Oh, Walter, well, or you can stand up, whatever you prefer. Okay, well, I thought you would like to ask a question. Do you have anything that you would like to?
I do have one question. There are all kinds of details related to this final agreement, this end of June agreement. Details having to do with numbers of centrifuges at a time when it emerges that there are 4 or 5 other means of enrichment, so that perhaps the number of centrifuges actually doesn't count. The issue of verification and cheating, which lots of people feel, as you do, that this is not only inevitable, but happening already. So does it make a difference what's in that final agreement? That's a question to you.
No, there is no difference. There is not such a thing as a good agreement. Let's face it. Every agreement entails those two things: legitimization of advanced nuclear status and a greater role for Iran in regional affairs. It doesn't matter the details. The details are totally irrelevant. Those are two political facts that are shining.
Interesting.
So I just want to. So is it the case that really there already is a fact?
Yeah.
That there is an administration in Washington that wants a deal. There is
They're desperate.
Desperate for a deal, lusting for a deal. I'm trying to find a stronger and stronger word. There is a government in Iran that wants the deal and also the ending of sanctions. And whatever happens at the end of June won't make a difference. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Since November 2013, you know, the agreement at Geneva, it's clear, that's it. The American policy is set, and we have to face the consequences. That's it. I think there is, you know, arguing about details is not so important. Maybe, you know, the American administration wants to be able to reduce the criticism in Congress or things like that. They say, I did that. But basically, there are two clear facts. I repeat, Iran becomes almost a nuclear power. Second, Iran receives a kosher certificate from Washington to act in the Middle East. That's it. And freedom of action. This is it. And this is clear. And the details of the agreement, if there will be one, you know, they're not relevant. We are on this course already a year and a half.
So we have time for a few questions.
Yeah, because the gentleman over here, Dan. You could come down here, Dan, and if you could identify yourself.
Dan Pollock with the Zionist Organization of America. I wanted to go back to the question of conflict between Israel.
I'm sorry, just to make it clear, I am going to ask for quick questions.
Yes, sir. So the quick question is, when it comes to engaging Lebanon and Hezbollah, is there feeling within the analytical community in Israel that you actually have an opportunity to make something happen when Hezbollah is committed elsewhere, thinking that there may be an inevitability of the crisis with Hezbollah? Doesn't it make sense to make it come when Hezbollah is almost fully committed elsewhere?
I don't think we are trigger happy. Netanyahu particularly has shown great restraint in Israeli use of force. You always know how a war starts, you don't know how it ends. Therefore, unless there is a clear necessity to invade southern Lebanon and take care of the missiles, I don't think we'll do it, even if Hezbollah is in a weak position.
Maury? Down here, I'm sorry.
Maury Amatang, former executive director of APAC. I read all your stuff. I think it's terrific. I'm glad to see you here. Question about Israel.
Thank you.
Given the fractious nature of its politics, and even though Bibi might want to preempt, where will Israel, where will its elites, where will its political people be in terms of support for Israeli preemption?
Well, I think, first of all, Israeli preemption has to be successful. If it will be successful, everybody will say, okay, how nice it was and how important it was. If it fails, we are in trouble. If we do it right, there is no question of, there will be support for it, public support. Maybe the international community in a hypocritic, typical way will, say, how can you do that and destroy the chances of peace or things like that. But, we've done it before. The international community was not always immediately happy. But afterwards, American president thanked us for doing the right thing. I think if we do it right, we are successful. Our contribution to Western security will be recognized.
Why don't we get someone on this side? But the woman in the pink sweater, right in the second row? And if you could identify yourself, please.
Yes, my name is Jan Bates. I'm just a private citizen.
Ah, okay.
And I wanted to ask whether Israel recognizes that perhaps the Congress might save us all from this terrible deal.
I think this is the gamble of Netanyahu. Netanyahu went to Congress knowing that he estranges the administration, hoping that Congress will prevent the deal. But again, even if it will prevent the deal, the two consequences of this negotiation so far are already rooted in the region. A signed deal doesn't matter.
The woman in the front row right here. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I'm Jolie Friedman with Newsmax. It's an honor to be talking with you, Dr. Inbar. I'm wondering what you think the United States should be doing, if anything, to help combat rising anti-Semitism that we're seeing in the world, especially in light of the United Nations claiming Israel to have the worst human rights in the world.
I have an unorthodox view about anti-Semitism. This is not our problem. Anti-Semitism is a problem of the West. I travel in India, in China. No, we didn't kill their God. They have no problems with us. Western civilization has this scourge, anti-Semitism. It's up to Western enlightened people to take care that they get rid of this disease. you know, we are only 7 million people. Our ability to change attitudes in the world is very limited. And basically, America is obviously less anti-Semitic than Europe. So, you know, here I wear a yarmulke, you know. In Brussels, I can go. And there are parts of Europe that the security people at the Israeli embassy tell me, take off your kippah. And this shows about, you know, the type of societies that are emerging now in Europe. And they have to get rid of it. We cannot. I do not participate in, you know, in this type of festivals against anti-Semitism. It's not my problem. It's their problem. It's a problem of the Gentile world, let's face it, a specific part of the Gentile world. In the East, they are different. And there are many more people in the East. You know, Indians, Chinese. They don't have this disease.
I think that's an excellent answer, and I think that probably runs out our time. And I think it's a very impressive way to end the panel. Actually, I think you're exactly right, and I'm very happy you said that. It was a pleasure to be on this panel with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you. Thank you.